We begin in the warehouse with Springtrap. Springtrap is seething with anger over his previous defeat. He's attempting to plot a new way to get back at Freddy and Co. And suddenly, he hears a familiar voice.
Springtrap, the time has come for us to seek our revenge.
The first time we got a scene like this in my previous rewrite, it was all in Springtrap's head. However, here, Fredbear is very much speaking to him. The camera begins to zoom in on Fredbear's face, and just before the screen cuts to black, a pair of red eyes peer out of the eye holes of his suit. We then cut back to see what Freddy and Co. have been up to since then. Foxy closer with Foxy planning to propose to her. Bonnie is planning to ask Chica out, but is not really sure if he can do it. So we ask Foxy for some advice, and Foxy obliges, showing that these two actually have a pretty good relationship, even if Foxy was kind of a jerk during the first season. As for Freddy himself, well, we get quite an interesting development because he wins the lottery. Yeah, I really needed to give him a large role, so this was what I decided to do. Deciding to use the money he won to do some refurbishment on the pizzeria, he sends out the rest of the Fazbear gang to sort of get rid of some of the old, pieces of Fredbears so that he can replace it with, new material. Mangle goes off to tear out some of the old boards, but while she's doing so, she makes a odd discovery. Underneath one of the old boards, she finds a secret compartment. And deep within that secret compartment is a fedora. Mangle is, of course, very shocked and confused by this discovery. So she goes to Bonnie and Chica to hopefully find some sort of way to explain it. Deep within the fedora, they find a note with the initials FK and a location written on it. Badham Preschool. Bonnie attempts to do some research on anyone with the initials FK who worked at a place called the Badham Preschool, but he can't find any information. He doesn't even find any sort of hint that there was a place called Badham Preschool. However, Bonnie gets a sneaking suspicion that this is just one massive cover-up, and that something or someone is hiding something from the rest of the world. Meanwhile, Springtrap is doing an investigation of his own. Fredbear has not spoken for quite a while. He attempts to provoke this thing into talking, and eventually, something does happen. Fredbear rises, and right in front of Springtrap begins to take on a more monstrous, nightmarish form. This being explains to Springtrap that he is a dream demon, a being created solely to feed off the nightmares of people. And he can sense that Springtrap wants to spread the exact same fear to Freddy and Co.
Join me, and I will help you get revenge. I will help you seize your control over them.
Springtrap's expression shifts from one of confusion and fear to one of rage. Back with Bonnie, Chica, and Mangle, they attempt to find someone who can answer their questions. They find a man, and he seems open to answering their questions, but as soon as they mention Badham Preschool and show him the fedora, he is sent into a fit of paranoia. The man then very cryptically tells the now very concerned animatronics, "You go looking too far in for the stuff. He'll come for you too. Bonnie asks if the he is referring to is the FK mentioned in the hat. However, the man quickly steals the hat and runs off with it. They follow him to a police station where they find the fedora in an evidence locker, deciding that they need to break inside to both retrieve it and also potentially find some more answers resolving this situation. So we get a little bit of banter between Mangle and Chica. You can't actually be serious, right? This might be our best bet at getting some answers, Mangle. Go ahead. But if you get caught, I'm not sticking up for your yellow-feathered ass again. They break inside the evidence locker, not only retaining the fedora, but also finding a case file. However, most of the data has been expunged. Well, that was all for nothing. Chica remarks as she throws the case file on the floor. Bonnie is just about to say something to her when he suddenly hears her scream. Bonnie Mangle turned to see what made her scream, and they look down in horror as they see, having fallen out of the evidence locker, a slightly scorched glove with knives on it. The three of them manage to flee the police station with both the fedora and the glove. And back at the pizzeria, Bonnie and Chica attempt to continue their search, now with the knowledge of this knife glove. They only find one article, however. An article simply titled "The Dark Secret of Badham Preschool." However, upon clicking on the article, it just leads to a 404 page, which understandably pisses Chica off. Mangle tells the two of them they should probably just take a break from this whole investigation, so they do. However, after they leave the room, we watch as the knife glove is pulled across the desk. We finally cut back to see what Springtrap and Fredbear, quote unquote, are up to. They are in the warehouse creating more animatronics. However, once they have been built, they're put in a machine, and Fredbear uses Dream Demon powers to enhance them. These, of course, become the Nightmare animatronics. Springtrap smiles evilly before turning his attention to something else he's been creating. Meanwhile, with Freddy and Foxy, we've been seeing quite a bit of them in a sub storyline, with Freddy starting to become more self-centered and stuck up, thanks to all the money he has now, and Foxy becoming very concerned. Well, finally, Foxy gets fed up with Freddy's crap, and leads to the two of them getting into an argument and Foxy announcing that he's going to quit. Then we get a scene very similar to, that one iconic scene from season 1. Albeit here, rather than it being Chica about to attack Mangle, it's Nightmare Foxy. Instead of him just attacking her with a butter knife for all intents and purposes, he actually grabs her by the scruff of her mangled neck and drags her off to who knows where. Mangle being kidnapped for the second time obviously leaves a lot of the animatronics horrified and concerned, and finally leads to Freddy putting away his mind focused on profit. However, before Freddy and Co. can go and rescue Mangle, they have to deal with Plush Trap, who was sent out by Springtrap to stop them. They manage to get him out of the picture. I don't mean that like to kill him or anything, just yeet him across the hall before they head off to rescue Mangle. Meanwhile, Mangle finds herself back in the warehouse, and Dishoom comes face to face with a figure. Not Springtrap, not Fredbear, someone far more evil. So yeah, in case you already don't know, I've basically made this season into a secret sequel to A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010. Now you're probably wondering, why am I using A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 instead of the original? The 2010 remake sucks. Yes, I know. I hate it too, but I'm already using OG Freddy for my What If Jason Wasn't Hell of a Boss series, so it was either this or New Nightmare. And honestly, New Nightmare is just a whole other can of worms I don't really feel like opening up right now. So yeah, we're using Pedo Freddy. Krueger reveals to Mangle that after the events of the 2010 remake, where Bad Emperor's School was burned down, Fredbear decided to build his restaurant on top of its burned down remains for some reason. And with everything that happened in season 1, Krueger was able to sort of feed off of the fear that was caused by those events, and it's given him enough power to come back. And he's working alongside Springtrap and Fredbear in order to finally kill the animatronics so that then he can escape and continue his spree of terror. Unfortunately for Krueger, Freddy and Co. show up at that point. But soon they have to come face to face with their nightmare variants. And we get a scene sort of like that one scene from Twisted Ones where like the OG animatronics fight their twisted counterparts. Just here it's them fighting the nightmares. And then again, the nightmares are basically the game versions of the Twisteds, or I guess to be more accurate, the Twisteds are the book versions of the Nightmare animatronics. Efforts, they are ultimately overpowered by their nightmare variants. Foxy attempts to step in to save Mangle from Freddy. However, Krueger throws him across the room before beginning to strangle Mangle. It rhymes. And then, just he's about to kill her, he says,
Now, no one sleeps.
However, just as he's about to slide his knife fingers over Mangle's throat, "Get away from her, you bastard!" Everyone is shocked as Springtrap has now turned on Krueger. Not only because he's about to hurt Mangle, but also because he discovered from Krueger implying it himself that he was the one responsible for all the inappropriate child touching that occurred at the Bad Ham preschool. And he has no respect for people who hurt children. In fact, he's probably the opposite of William Afton in that way. So, yeah, he proceeds to challenge Krueger to a fight. It goes about as you'd expect. Krueger overpowers Springtrap and rips off his arm.
Face it, you can't win. Now you're gonna die.
Go ahead. Kill me. Over and over again. I won't stop. I will not die. Because I always come back.
He said it! He said it!
Krueger is just about to end Springtrap. However, suddenly, the lights go dim. And when they turn back on, Springtrap and the rest of the Fazbear crew is surprised to see that Fredbear's body is lying on the floor. And the being that was using his corpse as a vessel has revealed his true form. Dream Demon, who reveals his name is simply Nightmare, explains that long ago, when Freddy was in the process of being burned alive, Nightmare came to get revenge on the children who led to his death. Due to being in close proximity to Nightmare, Freddy is still able to use his dream powers in the real world, However, with Nightmare having turned on him, he is now weakened. Nightmare summons the spirits of Freddy's victims, who begin to drag him down to hell.
It's time to face the consequences. It's time for you to answer for your crimes.
Freddy attempts to drag Mangle down with him, only for Foxy to kick his hand away, leading Mangle to fly back into a box full of spare parts. However, as Freddy attempts to free himself, the ground underneath the pizzeria begins to give way. Hell begins to bleed into reality. Springtrap realizes what must be done. Plushtrap returns, knocking Freddy in the head, disorienting him, and giving Springtrap enough time to pin him down, grab his hand, and begin pushing him down. Springtrap tells Freddy and Co. to get out of there as fast as they can. Mangle tries to reach out to him, but he softly smiles at her. When the smoke clears, both Springtrap and Freddy Krueger are gone. We then skip forward about a week later. Things are looking up for the Fazbear Gang. Freddy decided to be selfless and use the money to help the town build a memorial for the victims of the Badham preschool thing. Mangle has found a new joy in life as a take apart back together attraction. Though on the bit of the bummer side, she has a quite annoying endo head attached to her. And she asks Chica out, and she reciprocates. And of course, Foxy proposes to Mangle, using the exact same cupcake ring that Springtrap used in Season 1. In the post-credit scene, we see Springtrap waking up. He has no idea where he is. He appears to be in some sort of blimp, and he's holding Krueger's glove. He turns around, and we're greeted by a familiar figure. What the fuck?